is no longer really an opportunity or choice, it's an imperative. To telling the story, how do we make sure that we're taking full advantage of any and all assets that are on the grid and at customer premises.
Welcome everyone to the EI360 podcast. My name is Sandy Coughlin. I'm joined here with David Swank. David, welcome. We are still talking about VPPs and DERMs, the month of October. And today, David, is Friday the 13th. It is our 13th episode. And I guess some people would consider that an unlucky number. And we did have our technical difficulties this morning trying to connect. But I think it's a lucky number because we have an amazing guest that we've been trying to get on the program for a bit. Finally, our schedules aligned and he is here. So today we have Mark Hefner with Power Navigation. He is the founder and CEO, and he is going to share insights with us on change management and the transformational times that we're in right now and the paradigm shifts that are taking place, especially in regard to energy management. So David and Mark, well, first we'll welcome Mark. So
Good morning.
Welcome, Mark. And David, I would love for you to share with our audience the relationship we have with Power Navigation and Mark, and what a great benefit it is to an exchange. And I'm going to turn that time over to you and start this conversation.
Yes, well, Mark, again, thank you for joining us today. And Sandy, the relationship with Mark goes back several years for me. And I can tell you, as we get the opportunity to introduce Mark today, I would first introduce him as a friend, as a board member, and I believe someone who has extensive background, experience, and knowledge in not just change management, but the transformation that is required by a company who's facing transformational times. And so, Mark, it's really, I think, a privilege of ours to have you here today. But on our board, you've been instrumental in guiding NX as we move into the market, and I'm certain that our audience will appreciate a lot of your insights today. And so welcome, and we'll jump in here in a moment and share some insights.
Thank you, David.
Well, again, Mark has extensive backgrounds and as a principal with KPMG and Ernst & Young. And so, Mark, again, we know that you're going to provide to the audience today some insights, and we're going to be starting to talk about launching a new program together in the coming weeks for utilities, for commercial industrial customers who are really addressing this transformational time that we're talking about. I hoped really today, Mark, one of the things we want to do is really kind of create some context around this idea of, paradigm shifts and transformation. And Mark, I heard a quote here recently, and I really like this quote. It says, "And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music." And I like that quote because I really think that in a time where you start seeing the shift that's happening in the industry, a lot of people who are doing new and innovative things look insane to some people. Some of the things that are put into practice. But for those that really hear the music and know where the market's going and where the market's driven, that's important. And I think when you start looking at the context around what's happening, it really changes your perspective. It changes your paradigms. I'm just going to throw a few contextual things out there, Mark, for us to at least have for our audience to know. And, we as NX talk about the 3Ds, digitalization and decentralization, decarbonization. And when you just think about what that means, the amount of investment that's being made in the Internet of Things, nearly 142 billion is projected by 2026. When you think about some of the things that are happening in the energy market with microgrids, 19% growth year after year, and the impacts of grid resiliency today, and the grid intelligence that's happening right now, and understanding that many utilities only use 4% of the data that they ever even receive into their companies. C&I markets, we're seeing the opportunities for C&I to take advantage of new technologies like we've never seen before. So, we could go on and on about the context of why and the change that is going on. But I want to jump right in, Mark, and give you the opportunity to just share some of your thoughts about and perspectives about the change that's taking place and what utilities and C&I customers should be preparing for. And so I'd first ask you, Mark, when we think about this, how can utilities and commercial industrial customers best prepare for a digital world, a smart everything?
Well, I think there are three things that that I would recommend that they do. I think the first one is to get your workforce ready for change. In the digital world that we're talking about, there is a deep pool of knowledge that's not resident in many of these companies today. And to get your workforce ready, start the process of educating your workforce about what's happening in the market, what opportunities that provides to them, what are the strategies and the solutions that are out there that your particular utility might be pursuing in the future. So I think that's the first thing. I think more specifically, focusing on the senior team. I see a lot of my clients chasing after what I call shiny objects. They see a solution. They see, oh, I need a virtual power plant, or I need to do a DERM, or I need to have smart buildings. What have you. I think what they're missing is a clear vision of where they're going, where they need to take their utility. 5 years from now, what does that look like? What are the goals they have to achieve? That strategy, I think is important to start there. Start with a long range plan as to what is it you're trying to transform to. Mm-hmm. And then I think lastly, I think you've got to start educating your board. I think you've got to also prepare your board of directors to support change that's major. I mean, this is not incremental change. This is big time, major transformational stuff. And if you don't have your board prepared to support that, when the ultimate pushback comes, you may stall. And maybe worse, you may fail and go back and lose ground. So those are the three things that I would recommend that utilities and C&Is do to prepare for this transformation.
That's great advice, Mark. What I hear you saying is just laying that foundation. And I know we say a lot of times too about how point solutions sometimes can really become even more of a challenge because you're not looking at things holistically. And I think what you're describing there is a very holistic view and approach. So great advice. Mark, in thinking about that pushback that you're speaking of usually comes back through even what would be the members or the consumers, the constituents, whomever, whatever you refer to your customers, perhaps. And I think that on that same point, how does a utility begin to kind of work with this next generation customer who we've always called the consumer or member, but ultimately now have the opportunity to become a prosumer that are hearing the opportunities for new innovations that they're hearing about distributed energy, whether that be distributed energy that's solar or battery or whatever that may be. They're hearing about smart devices and smart sensors and looking at deploying those in their facilities. Everyone's very aware of the electrification, the electric vehicle charging. So we have this whole evolution that's happening at an accelerated rate with the consumer. And now we're hearing words like prosumer. And so, again, could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, in the context of your commercial and industrial customers, those consumers becoming prosumers, I was recently at a major conference where C&I customers were there, mixing with the utilities that are serving them, and they each have their own set of objectives that they've been given from their management, whether it be to reduce cost, reduce their carbon footprint, improve customer service. Each of them, I think, need to also be educated by the utility as to what's possible for them. And I think the relationship between the utility and the C&I customers has got to be a focus for the utilities to really build on that relationship, if you will, partner with them to help them develop a strategy for how they're going to achieve the objectives they've been given by their management. And I think partnering and relationship and knowledge transfer to help them understand what can they do to really be prosumers and to achieve the objectives that they have for their companies.
No, that's great. I think, coming from the utility industry, Mark, I've always believed that it is so critical, especially with C&I customers, which is a large part of the load for the utility industry, is that the alignment and of your overall objectives are so important. Always have been, especially as we think about rates and demand and energy pricing, and how we can best align infrastructure with the usage of the consumer. As you think about a virtual power plant today, it seems to me the more things change, the more they stay the same, because ultimately, really what that's doing is reinforcing what we've always really been dealing with. It starts with the load. We don't build any infrastructure unless there's a load to build the infrastructure to. And today we have some tremendous opportunities, I believe, and that's what NX is really all about. And that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to launching with you, Mark, is how do we begin to educate not just the utility, but work hand in hand with them about re-engaging and reconnecting with their members, and really confronting this transformation head on, and creating opportunities with this new IDRP, integrated distribution resource planning, to achieve that. So how do we help them get on the same sheet of music?
Well, I tell you, I think the best way to develop a strategy, I don't care what business you're in, is to go to your customers. Understand what your customers need, understand what your customers are trying to achieve, and let that inform your strategy as an organization. I think in the context of a utility and C&I, it's like they work together to develop this strategy. You engage with your C&I customers, you understand what their needs are, you let that inform your strategy utility to support them, and then you bring them along as part of that journey. So you're aligned from the beginning. And I think that's really key.
Yeah, that's great, Mark, because I think, again, kind of going back to this integrated distribution resource planning, I mean, the very essence of that is being integrated. Understanding the goals and objectives, as you just described, of the customer. What's the customer going to be investing in that might have impact on the utility system, and how can those investments be leveraged, enhanced, increase value from both parties. So that's outstanding, Mark. Mark, kind of as we wrap this up, I'm sure you've heard this story before from Zig Ziglar, who talked about that when he was taking a group to the Washington Monument, and he was getting close to where the guide was. The guide made the comment that it was 2 hours to wait to take the elevator to the top of the monument. But the guide kind of smiled and said, "There's no wait if you're willing to take the stairs." And I think that, today, I think a lot of people are trying to short circuit what it requires to make this transformation. And you've done a great job in this short time frame. And I think a large part of what we're going to be introducing collectively through this new program is how do we help people take the proper steps and start at step one. And because ultimately, I love the statement, there's 2 times to plant a tree, today and 20 years ago. And I do believe strongly in what you're saying. It's time to begin that plan. And it's time to begin to take the journey of the steps required to get to the top of the monument. So I just love to hear kind of your wrap up thoughts, Mark. It's always great to hear your insights. And I'm always reminded of just the experience you bring in this just idea of strategy and transformation.
Well, I've been involved in many industries over 40 years of doing this work, and I've worked all over the world, helping organizations, transform. And it is very challenging. There's risk involved, and kind of the analogy that I use oftentimes is, climbing Mount Everest.
Yeah.
If you've never climbed Mount Everest, you don't want to do that by yourself.
No.
You want to follow a path and a trail that's been established, and you want a Sherpa to go along with you, or Sherpas, to ensure that you safely make it to the top of the mountain and back again. And that's what I would really encourage, those that are about to engage in this kind of a transformation, is learn from others. Find out what are the best practices. Find out what are the steps that have proven to result in successful transformation, and follow those steps to the top of the mountain.
Yeah. Great advice, Mark. Well, Mark, again, I want to tell you, thank you for being a part of NX, the board, and and we're excited about taking steps with you to introduce to the utility industry and C&I customers about how we can climb Mount Everest together.
Well, I am too, and I'm looking forward to helping.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you, and Sandi, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. Wow.
Yep.
This was a really great episode. If anybody wants to find Mark, it's Power Navigation, and you can find him on LinkedIn. And then please follow us on LinkedIn as well. And you can subscribe to this podcast. And that's it for now, but we will see you next time. Thank you.